aerospace and defense manufacturing,
machines and automation,
additive manufacturing,
smart manufacturing,
the global manufacturing economy.
Welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals, powered by SME. From the design screen to the shop floor to final assembly, we drive the conversation about making manufacturing smarter by connecting people who are passionate about manufacturing.
Hello, and welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals. I'm your host, Steve Plum, Editor-in-Chief for SME Media. I'm joined today by Ron Bennett, the founding Dean and Professor Emeritus of the School of Engineering at the University of St. Thomas. He also served as the Executive Director of the Minnesota Center for Engineering and Manufacturing Excellence, and is a founding member of the Engineering Leadership Development Division of ASEE. Prior to entering academia, Ron held leadership positions in the appliance, electronics, medical device, and knowledge engineering industries. With co-author Elaine Millam, he published the book Leadership for Engineers, The Magic of Mindset, which brings us up to today with Ron and Elaine collaborating again on a new book, The Engineer's Guide to Authentic Leadership. Welcome to the program, Ron.
Thanks, Steve. Good to be here.
So I gave you the overview of your resume, but let's dive in a little bit deeper and tell us more about yourself and your background. I know you spent 30 years in industry before jumping in, but started off as a Boy Scout and learned some lessons from your father, who didn't come from a technical background. What was your childhood like, and were you always curious about how things worked?
Well, yeah, I was. Childhood was just great. Actually, my father was a newspaperman, and he taught me to consider the source. Anytime I saw controversial information, he said, you just have to sort it out, and you have to look at the sources and see which ones you trust. My uncle is the one that really got me interested in the technical side. He was an engineer in the war, Second World War in Italy and North Africa. And when he returned, he got back before my dad did from the war. And he would get me involved in all kinds of projects, building things, and that sort of stuff. And it really triggered my interest. And when I was a kid, I built, vacuum tube radios and a host of different things like that. So I got an early introduction to inquiry. My first manufacturing job, though, was as rebuilding a bunch of humidifiers for an appliance company. And I liked that job, but I liked even more the one that followed. I got a technician's job when I was in college in the laboratory at National Presto Industries, and got to do failure analysis of all kinds of return product and testing of new designs. And the thing I liked most about both those jobs were my bosses. They were just outstanding, and that triggered my interest in leadership. And then after I graduated from college, PhD, I went to work for a company that did photochemical machining, and just totally enjoyed all my experiences there, both in the plant and with customers and vendors. And then I got into a pacemaker company that was even more fun.
Your degrees are in mathematics and physics, and you got into nuclear physics as well. And talk a little bit about the perceptions and the reality of technical vocations and skills and leadership. And I know in the book, I think you said less than 50% of undergraduate engineering programs have any sort of leadership teaching. How does that affect the engineers coming up through the ranks?
Well, I'll start with the math and physics and engineering. I thought I liked basic science, but when I got to grad school, I found I liked metallurgy just tremendously. And so I did a lot of materials engineering kind of work through my career, but I got involved with a startup company, and I was employee number 11, and I said, what do you want me to do? And the guy said, set up sales and marketing. So for 8 years, I managed a sales force. And that's where I really learned about engineers. I had a lot of them work for me, and they were all really good technical people, but not a lot of them communicated well. And I found out that in dealing with engineers across the country, about 10% were really advanced and innovative, and the others were sub-optimized. Their technical skills were good, but their ability to communicate and understand who their customer was, and how to build a team, and how to get people to work with, how to capitalize on all the skills and experience of their colleagues was minimal. And that's what got me interested in the leadership piece.
And that's mainly from a lack of formal education as well as a lack of mentorship?
Yeah, it's a lack of formal education, but even more than that, I think it's the problem I noticed in my career is whenever I got promoted to new responsibility, I was never told why. And I don't recall ever having any real training to deal with the new issues I'd have to confront in the new position. So it's a combination of not being covered in the academic world, but also on the job, that companies could get a lot more out of their folks if they provided adequate training for it and help people understand why they were chosen for a particular role. It's been my experience that other people see a lot more in you than you do in yourself, and they need to be able to tell you about that. And I think that's a hole that's missing, and that's part of the leadership dilemma.
And when you came to St. Thomas, you were tapped to kind of jumpstart the engineering program and include some of these leadership classes?
Yeah, the way it panned out, while I was still working in industry, I started adjunct teaching in this graduate program at St. Thomas. And St. Thomas sort of flipped it upside down. They started with graduate engineering, and then we brought in undergraduate engineering later. So while I was an adjunct, I taught graduate courses. When I came on board full-time, all of a sudden the opportunity opened up to start an undergraduate engineering program. And I taught some of the students a bit about leadership in that. But when we started the new master's degree in technology management, Clint Larson, who was an SME officer, a Honeywell guy, said, "What are you doing about leadership?" And that's when we brought Elaine Millam in to develop a leadership course for our grad students.
So this has really been a lifelong project for you. This is the new book. It kind of culminates in all of this learning and your experience. How does the new book differ from your original book, and what do you hope to accomplish by it? And tell us a little bit about the name, the authentic leader.
Yeah, there's a concept in leadership about the authentic nature of leadership. Bill George and other folks talk about this. And it's just the idea of being yourself no matter where you are, whether you're on the job or whether you're at home or whether you're coaching soccer or whatever it is. Just being yourself. And the difference in the new book is it has the core of the old book there, but we put a front end on it that answers the why question. I talk about my journey, and I'm hoping that readers will relate my experiences to theirs. I'm sure many of them will trigger similar experiences that they've had where they've heard something and they don't quite understand what it means. Like the time of the president of the company, in response to some idea I had, said, "That's a fantastic idea." I felt like $1 million, and then he said, "Now go sell it." And I had no idea what he was talking about. Stuff like that. So I talk about my journey. Then we talk about the principles of how you become a leader, what you need to learn to develop your own leadership ability, and it's all inside you already, and how to put that into action. And then the final section where I interviewed these folks that I consider to be really excellent leaders that include folks like Bob Johnson and Diane Chong, who have both been SME presidents, to demonstrate that there's no one style, and you don't have to be a well-known figure to be a really good leader.
So it reminds me of the old Vince Lombardi quote, "Leaders aren't born, they're made." And in his case, he was talking like it took a lot of hard work. But from a leadership standpoint in business, it also takes a lot of training. which you've alluded to here. And some of that also really taking an in-depth assessment of yourself, which you call finding the authentic leader. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, we all have different social styles and learning styles, and most people are familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality inventory, and the emotional intelligence capability, and so on. And there's the old quote of for the Delphi, the Oracle of Delphi: "Know thyself." We think we know ourselves, but we probably don't. So we use a lot of assessment instruments like those to help people learn more about what their natural modes are. There's nothing good or bad about any one. It's good to know what yours is. And then we for all of our graduate students that take the leadership training, they develop their own. It's like a super mentor program. They develop a board of directors, a group of people that they can consult and talk to when they run into questions and build relationships with, that help them work through learning more about themselves, quite frankly, and helping tell them what it is that of each person's character that really is powerful and how to build on strengths. And we emphasize building on strengths rather than trying to address weaknesses. We put the emphasis on anything that's a weakness. You hire somebody or you work in collaboration with someone to handle areas that you don't like or don't want to do or aren't good at. So it's that whole notion of a team and not having to be the expert at everything, but understanding there are people who are experts at lots of things and building a cadre of those folks around you.
So are there common traits that you've identified that you can see that will make good leaders, and how people can build on those attributes?
Well, in a sense, but I think that common trait is not there. Sometimes it's type A personalities that are the important or that sort of thing. It's not that, and it's more. Are you open to discussion and trying as a group to find the best solution, not necessarily yours? And so openness to others, recognizing other people's skills, recognize where you have skills and use those, but really being open to change and to hearing other folks is really, I think, the key.
And how important is it to involve and share information with disparate groups, whether it's engineering and accounting or finance or even other organizations?
Okay, I think it's essential. There's some research done in sociology that talks about two people get together on a plane that don't know each other and they have totally different backgrounds and they talk back and forth, and each of them learns something from that exchange. And I think that there's a notion here that I think William Wolfe was the president of the National Academy of Engineering back in the early 2000s, and he spoke at St. Thomas. And a question came up about innovation. And he said, the notion of innovation is taking one idea and matching it with another idea that has never been paired with it before. And the more diverse a group of people you have, and diversity in every aspect, not just gender or ethnicity, but age, work experience, a host of different things, the more diverse it is, the more likely you are to come up with more creative ideas. So it's the sharing of ideas and being open about doing that that's really powerful. And I remember back years ago when that area around Boston, Route 128, was so powerful, there was so much innovation going on in the companies. The research that was done at MIT on that found that engineers got together for lunch from different companies and talked about different ideas. And that was one of the motivators of why they were so innovative, is they shared ideas and from apparently disparate sources.
So, talking about technology, which is advancing at a very rapid pace now, of course it has been for some time, but what are the challenges and opportunities from a leadership standpoint and potential risk of that new technology brings, especially with the abundance of information that's available now.
This gets back to my dad in saying consider the source. His statement was, the newspaperman was, don't believe anything you hear and only half of what you see. And that's why I would raise the question, well, how do you know what's true? And his response was, consider the source, that it's becoming more and more difficult with artificial intelligence and quantum computing and all kinds of stuff coming at us. We have to develop finer-tuned filters to sort out what's true from what's not true. So I think from a leadership, and I mean leadership not just as the executive leader, I mean leadership throughout the organization. Anybody at any position can take a leadership role by standing up and saying, hey, I've got this idea, and let's do this stuff. At all levels of the organization, the top leaders particularly should really encourage people to validate and verify their resources, the sources of their information.
You talked a little bit earlier about embracing change or not being afraid of change per se, or risk and taking risk. Is there a fine line though between doing so and being taking too much for a gamble?
Oh, I suppose there is. I'm sure there are things, but I think that's where having a group of people together talking about stuff helps sort that stuff out. Because you get a variety of folks in a team, and especially if you go cross-discipline, as you were mentioning about not only engineering and marketing and sales and R&D and production and all those forces, people will find the flaws in your in your thinking pretty quickly. So there's some checks there, but I will jump ahead to Bob Johnson's. One of his admonitions is, never be afraid to make a decision. 70% of the time you'll be right, and the other 30% you can fix.
That's good advice. Well, speaking of Bob Johnson, you mentioned you interviewed 6 kind of high-level interviews that you focused on. Who are some of the other people?
Well, I knew Bob because he taught in our program. One of the others was, of course, Diane Chong, who was she was at Boeing and was also president of SME. I got to know her really well at ABET. We were a program evaluators together. We were involved in the whole way up until I stopped at the board of directors and she went on to be president. But I've always admired her thinking and her approach. Another person is a fellow named Chip Emery, who was at the CEO of MTS Corporation, but he held a lot of other things. He was a Navy assistant to Secretary of Interior or something in the Carter administration. So he had a really broad range of experience. And his forte is curiosity and asking lots of questions. I mean, that's the thing that stands out about Chip to me. And then there's Katie Kolbeck, who's an electrical engineer that became CEO of a consulting engineering firm in the Twin City. And she is super open to flexibility in the workforce, so giving people time to put their family in front of their work. She said that they always get the work done if you give them the flexibility to do the important things they need to do with their family. And she highly stressed things like being kind, just simply being kind. And another person I did was John Pavolny. He started out as a chemist in a small group at 3M back in the 40s, trying to put iron oxide on tape to record sound and eventually video, and he ended up being the VP of the division. And he was also my associate director of graduate programs at St. Thomas. Just an outstanding guy that built super relationships with and he was a very modest man, but he would every once in a while something would leak out. Like the time Marita, who was one of the founders of Sony, asked him to bring over a 3M engineer, and he said, "Okay, I'll bring a woman engineer." And he said, "Okay," and Marita said, "Yes, that's absolutely what I want to do." And he actually helped him build acceptance of women engineers, women technical people in Sony Corporation. And then Arnie Weimerskirch was at Honeywell, and he was also chair of the Malcolm Baldrige Award winners, and he was the quality guru. And his forte at Honeywell was to find some piece of operations in each of the divisions that was exemplar, was a best practice. And he would get them to communicate to the other divisions the things that were best practices in each of the divisions. And each of these folks come from different areas, different backgrounds, different approaches. They're quite different people. But all of them have the customer, the person you're trying to help, as their primary purpose.
Over your career, have you found that the role of leadership has changed, or what companies are asking them to do, what's required of them, and the skill set they need, or has that been pretty constant over the years?
No, I think it's changing, and it's changing all over the place. Our grad students at St. Thomas that did the leadership program, there were about 350 of them that we surveyed in some research back in 2020. And what we found for those folks, they took this to heart, the leadership piece, and they spread it well beyond their companies. They would get in there. And this was true in my case, too, when I started to learn about this stuff. My family said I became a different person. Theirs are having similar responses. They're getting more involved in civic activities, not just coaching soccer, but in community organizing and community work. I just talked to one today who's become a city council person at a neighboring community to Minneapolis. It's, I think, a bigger picture view that's happening, but it is still spotty. When we started the leadership division within ASEE, there were very few schools that offered leadership. That division built up from 2 people to about 1,000 within 3 or 4 years. And now there are leadership programs in lots and lots of universities, and in fact, even a Bachelor of Science in Engineering Leadership at U Texas El Paso. So it's a slow diffusion kind of thing, but I believe it's spreading in the younger folks.
Now, I would imagine that getting involved in the community would also go a long way in regards to the ongoing workforce shortage and skills gap to help attract the next generation into these professions.
I think that's true, and I'll tell you what I think it's based on is the folks that really understand leadership. It's more fun to work with them, and people learn more and are accepting more when they're having fun. And one of Diane Chong's quotes was, "People join a company because of its reputation. They leave a company because of their manager." So I think it's more and more important for supervisory people, managers, directors in companies to understand that they are creating or maintaining the culture and attracting and retaining employees is largely how people view them.
Well, yeah, it's always great to create a positive environment. I think that goes a long way. And on that note, Ron, thanks for joining us today. I hope to talk to you again to explore more of this. But if listeners want to read more about leadership, how can they get a copy of your new book?
The publisher is Arctic House Press, based in UK and in Boston. Their website is us.arctichouse.com, and that's 2 H's. And the book is The Engineer's Guide to Authentic Leadership. It'll be available September 30th.
Right. Well, thanks again. And to learn more about the latest manufacturing trends and hear more of our podcast, visit advancedmanufacturing.org.